Hello guys, my name is BJ Min from HowExpert.com, where we publish short how-to guides on unique topics by everyday experts. And today's everyday expert and author of 2 books is Alexandra Borzo. She's the author of ENTJ 101, which is a basic guide that will show you how to thrive as an ENTJ personality. Her second book is ENTJ Dating and Relationships Guide. And one unique thing about this is here at HowExpert, we strive to publish very unique topics. If you go on Amazon, there's a lot of books about ENTJ. There's a lot of general guides about that. But her second book, ENTJ Dating and Relationships Guide, if you look just on Amazon, ENTJ Dating or ENTJ Relationships, that's the only one out there in the world right now. So it may possibly be, she may be the first possible author to write about ENTJ dating on that topic. So that's pretty cool. Before we get started on the interview, I want to read a quick bio about Alexandra. Alexandra Borzo is a high-spirited ENTJ who moved abroad to satisfy her ample extroversion. Originally from Des Moines, Iowa, Borzo grew up with travel and old movies and a sleepy city to call home. She began writing in adolescence and made her way into a career of marketing and consultation and content creation. Since Borzo has been abroad, she's kept an ENTJ eye on her family and her friends, all the while keeping busy with her small independent marketing company. She takes advantage of her seaside location as a distance runner. Borzo describes herself as most passionate about foreign language and travel. Thank you for coming to the interview, Alexandra. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. So you're an author of 2 books specifically focused on ENTJ. You're a real-life ENTJ, correct?
That is correct.
That's awesome. I was just doing research before this interview, and ENTJs, in terms of female ENTJs, is one of, I think, female ENTJs is the rarest personality for females. So that's pretty
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about when did you first discover you were an ENTJ? When did you discover that? And Myers-Briggs.
I discovered that probably about 5 years ago. A friend of mine asked me to take the test because he was curious. He had just taken it himself. And I actually was struck by that data number.
Who told you to take the test?
Oh, a friend of mine who's actually an INTJ. Yeah.
Really? Okay. So you took the test, you found out you're ENTJ. Sometimes we take that test and we get a different personality. Isn't that true sometimes?
That is true. And I've since taken it 2 additional times.
Yeah.
And I've found it interesting that my scores are actually going more and more in the direction of the ENTJ.
Right. Okay, so how, for those people who don't know what the Myers-Briggs is, some people out there, like, how do you know you are an ENTJ in a nutshell? What's like the one commonality about ENTJs? What's your personality like?
I would say one of the underlying things is how decisive we are. We're decisive, and we can definitely come off as very confident, sometimes cocky, because we also make decisions based on intuition. And so we see patterns, we decide that it makes sense that something is a certain way, and then we act on it.
Alexandra?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh goodness, I'm sorry. I don't know what we had happened there.
Don't worry.
Yes, so I would say one of the most defining things is just how decisive we are, because not only are we big into plans and action and moving forward and making the next step, but we also make a lot of these decisions based on intuitions, on things that we think just make sense, based on our observations, based on recognizing patterns, and we just act.
Right. I'm just curious, is this in your family, are there other ENTJs? This is a genetic thing, you think, from your research?
I'm sure that a lot of it is learned in the home. I would be very surprised if it were genetic, but I'm sure that a lot of it is learned behaviorally, and my dad is an ENTJ, so I'm sure that's where I picked up on it.
Oh, your dad's an ENTJ as well?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Same personality style. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what are ENTJ strengths? I mean, they're known as a commander. I've done some research, the general, the king. What's their strengths, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, we are called the commander and the field marshal because we're good at inspiring people. We're good at making people move. We decide that something makes sense a certain way and we act on it. We take plans and we put them in action, and then we get other people to follow along. And
Wow.
it can also mean that there is a lot of there are a lot of strong opinions about us too, because if our plans don't work, then whoever is following us might have something to say about it in the end.
So were you, in your opinion, were you born this way even as a child, this personality trait?
I don't think so. I think it really is learned.
Okay.
I think that, at least in my experience, I learned so much of it from what I saw at home and also reactions from my environment. And so I would say it's probably behaviorally learned more than anything.
Really? Okay, interesting. What's the general, for ENTJs, what's their weakness? Like something they can work on?
A lot of times, if we think something makes sense, if it's logical in a certain way, it is very hard for us to see past that. And so if someone else comes at us and they have a different way to look at it, if we don't see the logic, if we think that they're not being totally rational about it, then we think they're crazy.
Right. Okay. So what would be some good ENTJ, let's go into topic of like careers. What would be a career that would be good for ENTJs, and some careers that are not good for ENTJs?
I would say some careers that would be good for ENTJs would include things that require research, things that require analysis of data in particular, especially where we have enough authority to act on those numbers. So, for example, a president of the bank has to make a lot of decisions about what investments to follow, what products to can. And I think having that power, being able to make the analysis and then make the decisions, is something that we're really efficient at most of the time. Things that have a lot to do with getting input from multiple people and collaborating, unfortunately, not always that good at. And so sometimes corralling people and seeing how everyone feels isn't always our strength.
That's cool. That's interesting. So you guys are very decisive, and also independent, I'm assuming, right? In your thinking. So it's not really about, okay. Let's talk about dating and relationships in that category. How is it dating as an ENTJ? What advice would you give to other ENTJs out there about dating world, relationships world, as an ENTJ, very unique personality?
I would say one of the key pitfalls that I would tell other ENTJs to be careful about is how sometimes we fall into that trap of seeing the less logical as less valid. And so we're not feeling space. We're actually just the opposite. We're thinking based. And so we take things, and even a relationship, even a romantic relationship, we break down into what makes sense. And we even turn problems, we don't see them as problems, we think that they're projects. And we want to work on them, and we want to identify the problem and fix them. And that lack of connection with the emotional component can be problematic. And so my advice would simply be to remember that not everyone operates the same way we do. And even if we're convinced that it is the most efficient way, it's still not the way everyone works.
That's cool. That's cool. So, so what kind of ENTJ? I mean, what kind of other Myers-Briggs personality is ideal or compatible with the ENTJ from your experience and research?
In my experience, well, the last component of ENTJ is that J, right? And that J means that we focus our outward appearance to the world more with our decision making than with gathering information. We just act. We act and we make plans and we move forward. And so oftentimes we work well with people who are the opposite, perceiving types, because that way they can, quite frankly, they can follow us when they believe in what we believe in. If we share the same beliefs, then oftentimes the ENTJ takes the lead in that relationship. And also, I feel like we connect better with other thinking personality types than we do with feeling personality types because of that disconnect. We don't always see feelings as a relevant data point.
Interesting. So elaborate, please, on the perceiving type, and you're the J. Why do they get along well for ENTJs?
Sure. The J is the person who focuses on making decisions and moving forward, whereas the perceiving type is more about how they take information in. And so sometimes there can be a clash because the perceiving type might think that ENTJ is impulsive and goes too quickly. And the ENTJ might think that the perceiving type is wishy-washy and doesn't commit. But if they share the same belief system, if they're dating for the right reasons, if the relationship started because they have the same beliefs or they like the same things, the ENTJ can simply do a lot of the deciding, and the perceiving personality type oftentimes will feel good, will feel taken care of, will feel like the relationship is moving forward organically.
Right. Let's talk about the E and I. ENTJs, does it work? Do they're more compatible in dating with an extrovert or an introvert?
That's a very popular question, and a lot of people think that it's better to have one of both to balance each other out. But I think that really misses the essence of what extroversion really is. Someone who's extroverted gets charged up by interacting with the world. They like interacting with the world. We want to be a part of everything. But that does not mean that we have to be the center of attention. In fact, extroverts really like to ask other people what they think, what they believe, what they observe, what they've experienced, and we want to hear it. We want to just be a part of it. We just want to have an interaction. And so extroverts can actually do really well with other extroverts. If they both have things to say, then they'll both probably, eat it up.
That's good to know, because I always thought it was extroverted had to get along with introverts, but for the ENTJ specifically, that doesn't really matter as much.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next one. Is N versus what is it called? N versus P? No, N versus S.
Yes, N versus S. Mm-hmm.
For ENTJ, which one is ideal? Compatibility, dating.
I would say, well, in regards to this, we're talking about how people take in information, right? So the ENTJ is someone who is intuitive. We see patterns and we make conclusions. And sometimes those conclusions can be completely and utterly wrong, but sometimes they can be steps ahead of everyone else because everyone else is waiting for that resounding confirmation. We're just making assumptions based on educated guesses. And so in this regard, I think that ENTJ does well typically with other N personality types. However, the sensing type can also be a real complement to ENTJ. Because let's take the same experience. Let's say an S, a sensing personality type, and an ENTJ are in the same partner. The ENTJ will remember what everything meant. Like, oh, so-and-so spoke to this other woman, therefore there's something wrong with this relationship, right? But the sensing personality type will remember what they saw, what they heard, and they won't necessarily draw conclusions from it. But then the ENTJ might forget some of the details, like what music was playing and what they ate. And so having these two together can sometimes get a better picture of the world around them because they have the two different things that they pay attention to.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. Okay. Now let's go to thinking and feeling. You did mention they do get along with thinkers. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Give some examples why they get along with thinkers as opposed to feelers?
Yes. I feel like this is the most problematic difference because when someone is feeling something, if they're a real feeling-based decision maker, they're not really necessarily going to care about.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example of a feeling-based decision maker? Because I'm also a T. Like, how do they behave from your experience?
For example, let's say someone is picking a vacation destination, and they've heard good things about Medellin, Colombia. They've heard that the city has been reworked the last 20 years and they want to check it out. All of their friends have said, oh, you'll love it. And they make that decision based on that, right? But let's say that person has a history of not liking cities in the mountains. Let's say that person doesn't speak Spanish and is a little bit shy about putting themselves out there in a foreign country. Let's say that person would actually really prefer a beach town, typically, if they were given the choice between a few different vacation destinations. That person isn't looking at the objective information. They're not looking at the examples. They're not looking at the past experiences. They're just going based on a feeling. They have all of this positive feedback that people say, oh, you'll love it, it's a beautiful place, and they might choose this destination without thinking about any of the objective components that go into it. That would be a feeling-based decision. And when we're talking about feeling and thinking, we're talking about how people make decisions, right? So feeling-based decisions don't break down the data into these objective bullet points. Rather, they just go with what feels right.
And it just doesn't mesh well together with the ENTJ.
That's right, because if a feeling partner says, hey, this makes me feel a certain way, the ENTJ might ask why, and they're not trying to shut you down, they're just trying to understand it. But to a feeling personality, that should be enough. The fact that I feel a certain way should be enough, right? And for ENTJ, that's not enough. ENTJ wants why.
So what is enough for an ENTJ to go to this Colombia or whatnot? What would convince them to go instead of feeling? You gave an example of a feeler's way of thinking. For an ENTJ, what would convince them to go? What would work for them?
ENTJ would say, what are the qualities of the city that they want to visit? Do they want to visit a big city or a small one? Do they want to visit a coastal city or a city in the mountains? Do they speak one foreign language and not another foreign language? They would use all of these components to isolate and whittle things down and identify the best candidate. It would be about making a choice among candidates rather than making a choice based on the feeling.
Okay, so now can you briefly talk about, in your own words, about your two books? The first one, ENTJ 101, in a quick nutshell, in a summary, and the second one, we'll talk about the second book, the dating one. First one,
absolutely. In ENTJ 101, I just wanted to break down some of the qualities of this personality type. I also really wanted to talk about what it's like for women, because as you mentioned, it is the rarest type among women. ENTJ in general is one of the top 5 rarest personality types on the Myers-Briggs scale. However, among women, it is twice as rare. And so that's how it ends up being so uncommon for women. And I think there are a lot of stigmas that go along with it. So I talk about that a little bit in the book as well. But also I just wanted to break through some of the barriers. For example, the compatibility between extroverts and other extroverts. There are a lot of conversations out there that I don't think really get to the essence of some of the qualities of the personality type, which is why I wrote that first book. And then in the second one, I really wanted to break down relationships because on one hand, ENTJs are really efficient at dating. And efficient is the best word, even though you wouldn't think that efficient is a good word for dating. But on the other hand, because relationships are inherently emotional and have a lot of feelings involved, it can be some kind of dangerous water for ENTJs because of our persistence in objective data over feelings. Right.
So let's do one more question on ENTJ woman. They're very rare. I just took a look, Google search, rarest MBTI, and they do it by gender. Female, it is at the very lowest, like 0.9%. So there may be some ENTJ woman out there, maybe culture says you can't be like this. Like, what would you give them? They're known as confident, but I'm sure sometimes you feel like we all want to fit in sometimes. Like, what would be your advice to ENTJ woman out there in life and dating and everything?
I would say own what feels right to you. And so when it comes to personality type, Myers-Briggs measures preferences, which is why I really do think that it is behavioral based and not genetic. Behaviors we prefer over other behaviors, but we all understand this spectrum of behaviors. And so if you're a woman and you're an ENTJ, that means you prefer thinking objectively. You prefer looking at things intuitively. You prefer making decisions over collecting information. And you prefer extroverting yourself into the world. And if you prefer to be that way, despite the stigmas of confident women, despite the stigmas of supposedly bossy women or overly confident women, then that means that you really are wired for that. You really want to behave that way and function in this world as an active member of society with these behaviors. And you should own it.
Yeah, I like that, because like instead of trying to hide it away, that's who you are. You got to embrace it. You got to own it. You got to be yourself to the fullest, right? I totally agree, because if you try to hide it, then you're not being yourself.
Right.
So absolutely. So thanks for the interview. I appreciate you being on the interview, Alexandra. And for those of you guys watching this video, if you want to get our book, click on the link below the video to check out 2 of our books. And on top of that, if you guys don't want to do marketing services or copywriting and freelancing, check out our LinkedIn profile on the bottom of this page. Thank you for being on this interview. Take care, guys. Okay, cool.